Hello everyone, welcome to Anthony's World of Intuition. This is a blog site, but today we're doing something a little bit different. We're doing a podcast series. This is the first start of a podcast series, and we will be just doing a voiceover, but this is a introductory video, and there will be a concluding statement video as well to follow the podcast. Today we're dealing with A Mercy by Toni Morrison, a very good novel, and we will be talking about post-colonial literary theory and analyzing the novel through that lens, specifically talking about slavery. Alright everyone, so as we know well, the book I've been diving into is called A Mercy by Toni Morrison. She's a wonderful Nobel Prize winning author, and her work specifically with this book has been a privilege to experience. Now, I really liked how she incorporated many controversial topics into her writing, such as slavery, physical abuse, and even rape. What we are discussing today is her use of the topic slavery and the broad topic of racism. Something interesting to note is that back in those times, when the book takes place, that is, the early 1600s, slavery is not yet known as a term. The modern idea of slavery as we know it today does not exist yet, and people find it completely normal to live their lives owning other people. They are even considered more powerful on the social scale by others depending on how many people they own. Crazy stuff to wrap my mind around. Alright, so one important thing to discuss is what is slavery? Slavery is when one person is owned by another. A slave is told what to do by his or her master. So, in other words, a slave does not have any kind of freedom. They are completely owned by another person and told what to do by that other person. And they basically can't even live their own life the way that they want to. They are being controlled like puppets. And that's the unfortunate truth to the whole situation. This following quotation really resonated with me in the way that it has a far deeper meaning to it than it seems at first glance. To put things into perspective, this is Florence, a little slave girl, talking to her master. He was a different kind of slave owner, since he treated his workers really well. Florence, who grew up as a girl in his presence, didn't want to leave his side. What shocked me afterwards is that I realized not only does she mean she doesn't want to leave him because of the good man that he is, but she also doesn't want to leave because she's scared of the environment that she'll be thrown into. Keeping in mind that these were very racist times and people of white skin had all of the power over people of color. Colored folk would unfortunately be victims of physical and verbal abuse alike simply due to the difference in skin pigmentation, which I personally find horrendous. This is a reflection of the era and time that the story took place, and thankfully today, everybody is considered equal and we see far less discrimination, although some does prevail. Viewing the text through this post-colonial literary theory lens has allowed me to open up my perspectives of the novel to a more history-based analysis. Now that I've looked at the book this way, I'm discovering topics that I would not have if we were using an archetypal method or a feminist lens. The talk of first-generation slave trafficking from Africa and the talk of racism in the United States in a pre-segregation era is really astonishing to my mind. I did not know that it went further in history than just the 19th and 20th centuries. Racism and human trafficking were in full effect since hundreds of years ago, and us humans have been making these mistakes repeatedly only to start making changes as of maybe 50 or 60 years ago. Thinking in this way, I find myself honestly ashamed in a way to be human and of white descent. This is definitely not something to be proud of, but is definitely a reality that we should not keep in the shadows. A connection that can easily be made to this novel is one with the film 12 Years a Slave. Both of these works of art discuss as a general topic the ideas of slavery and racism, primarily the difference between them being the eras that the two main characters were in. Solomon Northup, the protagonist in 12 Years a Slave, survives the atrocities associated to being owned and physically abused by another human during the Civil War era of the United States. At that time in history, slavery as a concept was in full effect and procedures were most organized and mass accepted. A big difference between these two pieces is that nobody of color in the novel A Mercy had any legal hope of being freed from the cruelties of slavery. It was such an early phase that everybody widely accepted it and nobody dared put their foot down and oppose it. Meanwhile, in 12 Years a Slave, is saved by a Canadian abolitionist. There really was no such thing as abolitionists in that time that a mercy took place. Finally, what really ended up putting slavery to the test was the action of those abolitionists, something history can be proud of. I strongly believe that Mrs. Morrison was very specific when making the planning decisions behind writing this novel. She did not just want to introduce the topic of slavery and force it upon the readers. She cleverly used the character of an innocent little girl and portrayed her struggles of being enslaved and worked to the limit. I found this to be an extremely smart approach because this caused for a connection to be made between the reader and the protagonist, and I know for a fact that through my mind thoughts such as, "I never wish that to be my child," flowed as I read the novel. Through this personal connection, she was able to educate the thousands of readers that read her novel. A technique that a Nobel Prize-winning author should deservedly be able to master. This last quotation that I will be analyzing demonstrates the struggles of slaves not only in the 16th century, as seen in the novel, but throughout the history of slavery as we know it. Children often had to be separated from their mothers at birth or when they got of age to be able to do work, because separation guaranteed that work to be done since there was no more emotional connection. If it wasn't enough that they got abused physically, they were also strained emotionally through the separation of entire families. This could have also potentially been used as a technique by Morrison to lure the readers in even further to empathize with Florence, the main character of the novel, opening up the opportunity to pass on even more historical information on to the readers indirectly. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today. I hope you were able to learn something new and that you were able to enjoy your time with us. Thank you so much for tuning in to Anthony's World of Intuition blog podcast, episode 1. I hope to see you soon, and keep blogging.